Hello and welcome. The word barbarian often conjures images of savage warriors, fierce conquerors, and the brutal downfall of civilizations. It is a term loaded with connotations of chaos, destruction, and a stark contrast to the supposed civilized world of empires like Rome. But who were the barbarians, really? Were they merely the ruthless destroyers of the ancient world, or is there a deeper, more complex story to be told? In this documentary, we will embark on a journey through the tumultuous history of the so-called barbarian societies, those tribes and peoples who have often been misunderstood, maligned, and oversimplified by history. From the Germanic tribes and the Vikings of Northern Europe to the Huns and Mongols of the Asian steppes, these groups played a pivotal role in shaping the world we know today. We will explore how these societies, once dismissed as mere raiders and invaders, were in fact creators, innovators, and key players in the transformation of Europe and beyond. Through their interactions with the Roman Empire and other great civilizations, they forged new cultural, legal, and political landscapes that would lay the foundation for the medieval world and influence the course of history for centuries to come. This documentary will delve into the rich tapestry of barbarian cultures, examining their art, literature, legal traditions, and political systems. We will uncover the ways in which they contributed to the development of modern European nations, languages, and identities. Moreover, we will explore how the memory of these societies has been preserved and mythologized in popular culture, and how their legacy continues to resonate in the contemporary world. As we peel back the layers of myth and misconception, we will reveal the true legacy of the barbarians, not as mere destroyers, but as creators of new worlds and shapers of history. Their story is not just a chapter in the past, but a vital part of the ongoing narrative of human civilization. Join us as we uncover the untold story of the barbarians and discover how their influence lives on in the world we inhabit today. Chapter 1: The Birth of Barbarism. The term barbarian has been used throughout history to describe people or groups that were perceived as uncivilized, primitive, or outside the bounds of what was considered the norm by dominant societies. However, the concept of the barbarian is far more complex than mere labels of savagery or backwardness. The history of barbarism is intricately tied to the development of civilization itself, as the two concepts are often defined in opposition to one another. This chapter will explore the origins of the term barbarian, its use in ancient societies, and how these early interpretations have shaped our understanding of what it means to be civilized. The word barbarian originates from the ancient Greek word barbaros, which was used to describe anyone who was not Greek. To the Greeks, the term conveyed a sense of otherness, of people who spoke languages that sounded like unintelligible babble, barbarbar, hence, the term barbaros. The Greeks viewed themselves as the epitome of culture, refinement, and civilization, and anyone outside their cultural sphere was deemed inferior, or at least different in a way that could be threatening. The concept was not unique to the Greeks. The ancient Chinese, Romans, and other great civilizations of the past also had similar terms to describe outsiders, people who were perceived as less refined, less cultured, and often less human. These terms were rooted in a sense of ethnocentrism, the belief that one's own culture, nation, or ethnicity is superior to others. It is within this context that the concept of the barbarian was born. In ancient Greece, the term barbaros evolved beyond its initial linguistic meaning to encompass broader cultural and political implications. The Greeks saw themselves as the inheritors of a glorious tradition of philosophy, art, and democratic governance. In contrast, they perceived the barbarians as people who lacked these qualities, and who were therefore considered less human. The Greek historian Herodotus, often called the father of history, provided some of the earliest accounts of barbarian cultures. In his histories, he described various non-Greek peoples, including the Scythians, Persians, and Egyptians, often emphasizing their exotic customs and practices. While Herodotus was remarkably open-minded for his time, acknowledging that other cultures had their own merits, the underlying assumption of Greek superiority persisted. This perception of barbarians became particularly pronounced during the Greco-Persian Wars, 499 to 449 BCE, a series of conflicts between the Greek city-states and the vast Persian Empire. The Greeks viewed the Persians as the quintessential barbarians, despotic, decadent, and slavish in their obedience to a single ruler, in contrast to the Greek ideals of freedom and self-governance. The famous battles of Marathon, Thermopylae, and Salamis were not just military confrontations but clashes of civilizations, Greece against the barbarian East. As the Roman Republic and later the Roman Empire expanded, the term barbarian was adopted and adapted by the Romans to suit their own purposes. For the Romans, the concept of the barbarian was more complex, encompassing a wide range of peoples and cultures that they encountered as they conquered vast territories across Europe, North Africa, and the Near East. The Romans initially borrowed the term from the Greeks, but over time, it took on a more specific connotation. To the Romans, barbarians were the uncivilized tribes that lived beyond the borders of the empire: Gauls, Germans, Britons, and others who resisted Roman rule and clung to their traditional ways of life. These peoples were often seen as violent, unpredictable, and uncouth, in stark contrast to the orderly and disciplined Roman society. Yet, the Roman view of barbarians was not entirely negative. The Roman historian Tacitus, in his work Germania, praised the simple virtues of the Germanic tribes, contrasting their rugged independence and martial spirit with what he saw as the corruption and decadence of Rome. This ambivalence towards barbarians reflected a broader tension within Roman society, a recognition that the very qualities that made the Romans powerful and civilized also made them vulnerable to moral decay. Over time, as the Roman Empire faced increasing pressure from external threats, particularly from the so-called barbarian tribes, the term took on an even more ominous meaning. The fall of Rome in the 5th century CE is often attributed to the invasions of barbarian groups such as the Visigoths, Vandals, and Huns, though the reality was far more complex. These groups were not merely destroyers of civilization but were also participants in the reshaping of Europe, contributing to the formation of new political entities and cultural traditions that would eventually give rise to the medieval world. While the Greeks and Romans were formulating their ideas of barbarism in the West, the Chinese were developing their own concepts of civilization and barbarism. The Chinese term "Hu" was used to describe the nomadic peoples of the steppes to the north and west of China, who were seen as the antithesis of the settled, agrarian Chinese civilization. Like the Greeks and Romans, the Chinese viewed themselves as the center of the world, the Middle Kingdom, and saw those outside their cultural sphere as lesser beings. The Chinese concept of barbarian was closely tied to their ideas of the mandate of heaven, the belief that the Chinese emperor ruled by divine right and that the Chinese civilization was inherently superior to all others. The Great Wall of China, built to keep out the nomadic barbarians, symbolized this perceived division between the civilized and the uncivilized. However, as with the Greeks and Romans, the Chinese view of barbarians was not static. Throughout history, there were periods when the Chinese court engaged in diplomacy, trade, and even alliances with so-called barbarian groups. The Mongol Empire, which conquered China in the 13th century, was initially seen as a barbarian invasion, but under Kublai Khan, the Mongols adopted many aspects of Chinese culture and governance, blurring the lines between civilization and barbarism. The concept of the barbarian has always been intertwined with that of civilization. Throughout history, dominant societies have often defined themselves in opposition to the barbarians at their borders, using the idea of barbarism to justify conquest, colonization, and cultural superiority. Yet, the line between civilization and barbarism has never been clear-cut. Many so-called barbarian societies had rich cultures, sophisticated social structures, and complex systems of governance that rivaled those of their more civilized neighbors. Moreover, the relationship between civilization and barbarism is dynamic. As civilizations rise and fall, the roles can reverse. The Romans, who once viewed the Germanic tribes as barbarians, eventually succumbed to the pressures of these same groups, leading to the transformation of the Roman world into the medieval European order. Similarly, the Mongols, once seen as the scourge of the East, became patrons of the arts and culture in the lands they conquered. In this sense, the history of barbarism is also the history of civilization. It is a story of encounters between different cultures, of conflict and cooperation, of destruction and creation. As we delve deeper into the history of barbarians in the following chapters, we will see how these encounters have shaped the world we live in today, challenging our assumptions about what it means to be civilized and what it means to be a barbarian. This concludes Chapter 1. The subsequent chapters will explore the rise and fall of barbarian societies, their interactions with empires and civilizations, and their lasting legacies in shaping the course of human history. Chapter 2: The Rise of Barbarian Societies. The term barbarian often evokes images of chaos and disorder, but the reality is that many so-called barbarian societies were highly organized, with their own systems of governance, social structures, and cultural traditions. These societies were often nomadic or semi-nomadic, with a deep connection to the land and a lifestyle that contrasted sharply with the settled, agrarian civilizations they interacted with. In this chapter, we will explore the rise of some of the most significant barbarian societies in history, examining their origins, social structures, and the ways in which they adapted to and influenced the world around them. The Germanic tribes were among the most prominent of the barbarian groups that came into contact with the Roman Empire. Originating in the dense forests and river valleys of northern Europe, these tribes were initially small, scattered communities that relied on hunting, farming, and raiding to sustain themselves. Despite their seemingly primitive lifestyle, the Germanic tribes had a complex social structure that was based on kinship ties, warrior elites, and a shared sense of identity rooted in their language and cultural practices. The Germanic tribes were not a monolithic entity, but rather a collection of distinct groups, each with its own leaders, customs, and traditions. Some of the most notable tribes included the Goths, Vandals, Franks, and Saxons. These tribes were united by a common language family and certain cultural traits, but they were also fiercely independent, often engaging in conflict with one another as well as with external enemies. One of the defining characteristics of the Germanic tribes was their warrior culture. Warfare was central to their way of life, and young men were trained from an early age to be warriors. The concept of comitatus, a warband loyal to a chieftain or king, was central to Germanic society. This warrior elite was bound by personal loyalty to their leader, and in return, they were rewarded with plunder, land, and status. The Germanic tribes' encounters with the Roman Empire had a profound impact on both sides. The Romans initially viewed the Germanic peoples as barbaric and uncivilized, but over time, they came to recognize their military prowess and began recruiting Germanic warriors into their armies. This relationship was complex, with periods of cooperation and conflict, but ultimately, the Germanic tribes played a crucial role in the decline of the Roman Empire. The fall of Rome was precipitated by a series of invasions by various Germanic tribes, most notably the Visigoths, who sacked Rome in 410 CE, and the Vandals, who established a kingdom in North Africa and sacked Rome again in 455 CE. The Germanic tribes did not just destroy the Roman Empire, they also laid the foundations for the medieval kingdoms that would emerge in its aftermath. The Franks, for example, would go on to establish the Carolingian Empire, which would become the precursor to modern France and Germany. While the Germanic tribes were formidable opponents for the Roman Empire, they were themselves threatened by the arrival of a new and even more fearsome group, the Huns. The Huns were a nomadic people from the steppes of Central Asia, known for their exceptional horsemanship and ferocity in battle. The origins of the Huns are somewhat obscure, but they are believed to have been related to the Xiongnu, a confederation of nomadic tribes that had troubled the Chinese Empire centuries earlier. The Huns were masters of mounted warfare, using their speed and mobility to devastating effect. Their ability to strike quickly and retreat before their enemies could respond made them a formidable force. The Huns were also known for their use of composite bows, which allowed them to shoot arrows with great power and accuracy even while riding at full gallop. This combination of mobility and firepower made the Huns almost unstoppable on the battlefield. Under the leadership of their most famous king, Attila, the Huns became one of the most feared powers in Europe. Attila, often called the Scourge of God by his enemies, led the Huns in a series of devastating raids across the Eastern and Western Roman empires in the 5th century CE. Attila's campaigns spread terror throughout Europe, and his name became synonymous with destruction and barbarism. Despite their fearsome reputation, the Huns were not merely marauders. They established a powerful confederation of tribes that stretched from the steppes of Central Asia to the plains of Hungary. The Hunnic Empire was a diverse and multicultural entity, incorporating many different peoples and cultures. The Huns themselves adopted some aspects of the cultures they encountered, including elements of Roman administration and diplomacy. The death of Attila in 453 CE marked the beginning of the decline of the Hunnic Empire. Without his strong leadership, the empire quickly fragmented, and the Huns were eventually absorbed into the various Germanic and Slavic tribes that they had once dominated. However, the legacy of the Huns lived on, particularly in the fear and respect they had inspired in their enemies. The Huns left a lasting impact on the history of Europe, not only through their conquests but also by setting in motion the migrations and invasions that would reshape the continent. The Celts were another significant barbarian group that played a crucial role in the history of Europe. Originating in Central Europe, the Celts spread across much of the continent, establishing powerful kingdoms in what are now France, Britain, Ireland, and Spain. The Celts were known for their distinctive art, religion, and social structure, as well as their formidable skills as warriors. Celtic society was organized into tribes, each led by a king or chieftain. These tribes were often in competition with one another, but they shared a common language, religion, and culture. The Celts were also known for their complex social hierarchy, which included a warrior elite, as well as a class of priests known as Druids, who played a central role in Celtic religion and law. The Celts were skilled metalworkers, producing intricate jewelry, weapons, and armor. They were also known for their unique style of art, characterized by intricate patterns and designs, often incorporating symbols from nature and mythology. This artistic tradition would later influence the art and culture of medieval Europe. The Celts were fierce warriors, known for their courage in battle and their skill with weapons such as the sword and spear. They often fought naked, believing that this would demonstrate their bravery and intimidate their enemies. The Celts were also known for their use of chariots in battle, a practice that was later adopted by the Romans. The Celts' encounters with the Romans were marked by both conflict and assimilation. The Roman conquest of Gaul in the 1st century BCE marked the beginning of the end for the independent Celtic kingdoms in continental Europe. The Romans viewed the Celts as barbaric and uncivilized, but they also admired their courage and adopted some aspects of Celtic culture, including their art and religion. In Britain, the Celts resisted Roman rule for centuries, with figures like Boudica, the queen of the Iceni tribe, becoming legendary for their defiance of the Roman Empire. However, by the 5th century CE, the Roman withdrawal from Britain left the Celtic tribes vulnerable to invasions by the Anglo-Saxons, who would eventually dominate the island. Despite their eventual defeat, the Celts left a lasting legacy in the cultures of the British Isles, particularly in Ireland and Scotland, where Celtic languages, art, and traditions continue to thrive to this day. The Celts also contributed to the development of medieval European culture, particularly through their influence on the art and religion of the early Christian Church. While the term barbarian is often associated with the decline of the Roman Empire, it is important to recognize that barbarian societies continued to play a significant role in world history long after the fall of Rome. One of the most powerful and influential barbarian groups in history was the Mongols, who established the largest contiguous empire the world has ever seen. The Mongols were a nomadic people from the steppes of Central Asia, known for their exceptional horsemanship and military prowess. Like the Huns before them, the Mongols were masters of mounted warfare, using their speed and mobility to conquer vast territories in a short period of time. The rise of the Mongol Empire began in the early 13th century under the leadership of Genghis Khan, a charismatic and ruthless warrior who united the Mongol tribes and launched a series of conquests that would eventually stretch from China to Europe. Genghis Khan's military strategies were revolutionary, combining traditional Mongol tactics with innovative approaches to siege warfare and psychological warfare. The Mongol Empire was not only a military juggernaut but also a highly organized and efficient political entity. Genghis Khan established a system of administration that allowed the Mongols to govern their vast empire effectively, incorporating local leaders and customs into the Mongol framework. The Mongols also promoted trade and communication across their empire, establishing the famous Silk Road, which connected East and West and facilitated the exchange of goods, ideas, and cultures. The Mongol conquests had a profound impact on the history of Asia and Europe. In China, the Mongols established the Yuan dynasty, which ruled for nearly a century and left a lasting legacy in Chinese culture and governance. In the Middle East, the Mongol invasions led to the destruction of the Abbasid Caliphate and the eventual rise of the Ottoman Empire. In Europe, the Mongols came to the borders of the Holy Roman Empire and influenced the development of states like Russia, which would later emerge as a major power in the region. Despite their reputation as ruthless conquerors, the Mongols were also known for their tolerance of different cultures and religions. Genghis Khan and his successors allowed their subjects to practice their own religions and maintained a policy of meritocracy, promoting individuals based on their abilities rather than their ethnicity or background. The Mongol Empire eventually fragmented after the death of Genghis Khan, but its legacy continued to shape the history of Eurasia for centuries to come. The Mongols' influence on trade, culture, and politics is still felt today, and their story serves as a powerful reminder of the dynamic and often unpredictable nature of history. The rise of barbarian societies was not simply a story of destruction and conquest. These societies contributed to the development of the modern world in profound ways. The Germanic tribes laid the foundations for the medieval kingdoms of Europe. The Huns set in motion the migrations that reshaped the continent. the Celts influenced the culture and art of the British Isles, and the Mongols established an empire that connected East and West in ways that continue to resonate today. These so-called barbarians were not merely the enemies of civilization, they were participants in the complex process of cultural exchange, adaptation, and transformation that has defined human history. As we move forward in this documentary, we will explore the interactions between barbarian societies and the civilizations they encountered, examining how these encounters shaped the world we live in today. This concludes Chapter 2. In the following chapters, we will delve into the interactions between barbarians and empires, the fall of the Roman Empire, and the lasting impact of barbarian societies on the course of history. Chapter 3: The Clash of Civilizations. The interaction between barbarian societies and established civilizations was marked by a complex mixture of conflict, cooperation, and cultural exchange. These encounters profoundly shaped the trajectory of world history, often blurring the lines between the civilized and the barbarian. In this chapter, we will explore some of the most significant clashes between barbarian societies and the great empires of their time, examining how these conflicts were not only military in nature but also deeply cultural and political. We will focus on the Germanic invasions of the Roman Empire, the Viking raids on Europe, and the Mongol conquests, as well as the ways in which these encounters led to the transformation of both the barbarians and the civilizations they encountered. The relationship between the Roman Empire and the Germanic tribes was one of the most consequential in history. For centuries, the Romans viewed the Germanic peoples as barbarians, uncivilized and dangerous outsiders who posed a constant threat to the stability of the empire. However, the reality was far more complex. The Romans and the Germanic tribes engaged in extensive trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange, and many Germanic warriors served as mercenaries in the Roman army. Despite these interactions, the Roman Empire struggled to manage its increasingly porous frontiers. The Rhine and Danube rivers, which marked the borders of the empire, became fault lines where the pressures of migration, economic strain, and military conflict converged. By the late 4th century CE, these pressures had reached a critical point, leading to a series of invasions that would eventually contribute to the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. One of the most significant events in this period was the crossing of the Rhine by the Visigoths in 376 CE. Fleeing from the Huns, who had pushed westward from the steppes, the Visigoths sought refuge within the borders of the Roman Empire. Initially allowed to settle in the Roman province of Thrace, the Visigoths soon found themselves exploited by corrupt Roman officials, leading to a rebellion that culminated in the Battle of Adrianople in 378 CE. The Roman army suffered a crushing defeat, and the Visigoths emerged as a formidable force within the empire. The Visigothic leader Alaric I continued to challenge Roman authority, and in 410 CE, he led his forces in the sack of Rome, a symbolic event that marked the beginning of the end for the Western Roman Empire. The fall of Rome sent shockwaves throughout the ancient world, and for many, it signaled the triumph of barbarism over civilization. However, the Visigoths were not merely destroyers, they were also builders. After the sack of Rome, the Visigoths established a kingdom in Gaul, modern-day France, and later in Hispania, modern-day Spain, where they adopted many aspects of Roman culture, including Christianity, Roman law, and Latin language. The Visigothic kingdom became a successor state to the Roman Empire, blending Roman and Germanic traditions in ways that would influence the development of medieval Europe. The Visigoths were not the only Germanic tribe to carve out a new identity within the remnants of the Roman Empire. The Vandals, who had crossed into North Africa in the early 5th century CE, established a kingdom centered on Carthage, from which they launched raids across the Mediterranean, including the infamous sack of Rome in 455 CE. The Ostrogoths, another branch of the Gothic people, established a kingdom in Italy, where they ruled as successors to the Roman emperors, preserving much of Roman culture and administration. The Germanic invasions did not simply bring about the fall of Rome, they also laid the groundwork for the medieval kingdoms that would emerge in its aftermath. These new political entities, often ruled by Germanic elites, maintained and transformed the legacy of the Roman Empire, blending it with their own traditions to create the foundations of medieval European civilization. While the Germanic tribes were reshaping the remnants of the Roman Empire in the west, a new wave of barbarian invaders was emerging from the north. The Vikings, seafaring warriors from Scandinavia, began their raids on Europe in the late 8th century CE, striking fear into the hearts of the settled populations of Britain, Ireland, France, and beyond. The Viking raids were characterized by their speed, mobility, and unpredictability. Using their longships, sleek, fast vessels capable of navigating both open seas and shallow rivers, the Vikings could strike suddenly and retreat before their enemies had time to mount a defense. Monasteries, towns, and cities were plundered, and the wealth of Europe flowed back to the Viking homelands, fueling their expansion and solidifying their power. However, the Vikings were not just raiders, they were also explorers, traders, and settlers. They established trade routes that stretched from the British Isles to the Byzantine Empire and as far as the Middle East. The Viking Age saw the creation of new trading centres, such as Dublin and York, which became important hubs of commerce and culture. The Viking raids also led to the formation of new political entities in Europe. In Britain, the Viking invasions led to the establishment of the Danelaw, a region of England under Norse control, where Viking leaders ruled as kings and jarls. The cultural and political impact of the Vikings in England was profound, contributing to the development of the English language and the emergence of the unified English kingdom under leaders like Alfred the Great. In France, Viking raiders, known as Northmen or Normans, were granted land by the French king in an effort to stop their attacks. This land, known as Normandy, became a powerful duchy that played a crucial role in European history. The Normans, who were of Viking descent but had adopted many aspects of French culture, would go on to conquer England in 1066, establishing a dynasty that ruled England for centuries. The Vikings also established a significant presence in the East, particularly in what is now Russia. Viking traders and warriors, known as Varangians, traveled along the rivers of Eastern Europe, establishing trade routes and settlements. The most famous of these was Novgorod, which became a center of trade and power. The Varangians also founded the state of Kievan Rus, which laid the foundations for the modern Russian state. The Viking Age came to an end in the 11th century, as the Vikings gradually converted to Christianity and integrated into the European kingdoms they had once raided. However, their impact on European history was lasting, contributing to the formation of new political entities, the spread of trade and cultural exchange, and the development of a distinctive Norse identity that continues to be celebrated today. The Mongol conquests of the 13th century represent one of the most dramatic examples of the clash between barbarian societies and established civilizations. Led by Genghis Khan, the Mongols emerged from the steppes of Central Asia to create the largest contiguous empire in history, stretching from China to Europe and the Middle East. The Mongols were initially a collection of nomadic tribes, united by Genghis Khan through a combination of military prowess, diplomacy, and sheer force of will. Under his leadership, the Mongols embarked on a series of conquests that brought them into contact with some of the most powerful civilizations of the time, including the Chinese, the Persians, and the Europeans. The Mongol conquests were characterized by their speed, brutality, and effectiveness. The Mongol army was highly mobile, relying on horse archers who could strike quickly and retreat before their enemies could respond. The Mongols also employed psychological warfare, using terror and intimidation to break the will of their opponents. Cities that resisted were often destroyed, their populations massacred or enslaved, while those that surrendered were spared and often incorporated into the Mongol administrative system. Despite their fearsome reputation, the Mongols were not merely destroyers, they were also empire builders. Genghis Khan established a system of governance that allowed the Mongols to control their vast empire effectively. Local leaders were often allowed to remain in power, provided they recognized Mongol authority and paid tribute. The Mongols also promoted trade and communication across their empire, establishing a network of roads and relay stations that facilitated the movement of goods, people, and ideas. The Mongol Empire had a profound impact on the civilizations it conquered. In China, the Mongols established the Yuan dynasty, which ruled for nearly a century and left a lasting legacy in Chinese culture and governance. The Mongols adopted many aspects of Chinese culture, including the use of Chinese bureaucrats and the adoption of Chinese religious practices. However, their rule also led to significant social and economic changes, including the displacement of the traditional Chinese elite and the integration of the Mongol aristocracy into the Chinese social hierarchy. In the Middle East, the Mongol conquests led to the destruction of the Abbasid Caliphate and the eventual rise of the Ottoman Empire. The Mongols also played a crucial role in the spread of Islam, as many Mongol leaders converted to the religion and promoted its spread across their empire. The cultural and scientific achievements of the Islamic world were also preserved and disseminated by the Mongols, contributing to the transmission of knowledge across Eurasia. In Europe, the Mongol conquests had a more indirect impact. While the Mongols never established a permanent presence in Europe, their invasions in the 13th century sent shockwaves through the continent. The Mongol threat forced European leaders to reconsider their strategies and alliances, leading to greater cooperation among the Christian kingdoms and the development of new military technologies. The Mongols also facilitated trade and cultural exchange between East and West, helping to lay the groundwork for the Renaissance. The Mongol Empire eventually fragmented after the death of Genghis Khan, but its legacy continued to shape the history of Eurasia for centuries to come. The Mongols were not just barbarian invaders, they were also creators of one of the most significant empires in world history, whose influence can still be seen today in the cultures, languages, and political systems of the regions they once ruled. The encounters between barbarian societies and established civilizations were not only about conflict, they were also about cultural exchange and transformation. As barbarian groups like the Germanic tribes, the Vikings, and the Mongols came into contact with the great empires of their time, they adopted and adapted aspects of those civilizations, blending them with their own traditions to create new and dynamic cultures. The Germanic tribes, for example, adopted Christianity and Roman law, which became central to the development of medieval European civilization. The Vikings, despite their reputation as raiders, were also traders and settlers who played a crucial role in the spread of goods, ideas, and technologies across Europe. The Mongols, who were initially seen as destroyers, became patrons of culture and science, promoting the exchange of knowledge across their vast empire. These encounters also had a profound impact on the civilizations themselves. The Roman Empire, for example, was transformed by its interactions with the Germanic tribes, leading to the emergence of new political entities that would shape the medieval world. The Islamic world was influenced by the Mongols, who helped to spread Islam across Central Asia and into China. The civilizations of Europe were shaped by the Viking invasions, which contributed to the formation of new kingdoms and the spread of Norse culture. The lines between civilized and barbarian were often blurred in these encounters, as both sides influenced and transformed each other. The legacy of these interactions can still be seen today in the languages, cultures, and political systems of the regions that were once the battlegrounds of these great clashes of civilizations. This concludes Chapter 3. In the following chapters, we will explore the fall of the Roman Empire in greater detail, the rise of medieval kingdoms, and the enduring legacy of barbarian societies in shaping the modern world. Chapter 4: The Fall of Rome and the Birth of New Kingdoms. The fall of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century CE stands as one of the most significant turning points in world history. It marked the end of ancient civilization in Western Europe and the beginning of the Middle Ages, a period that would see the rise of new kingdoms, the spread of Christianity, and the gradual formation of the modern European nations. The role of barbarian societies in the collapse of Rome has often been portrayed as one of pure destruction, but the reality is far more nuanced. This chapter will explore how the interactions between the Roman Empire and various barbarian groups contributed to the empire's decline and the creation of new political and cultural landscapes across Europe. We will focus on the Visigoths, the Vandals, the Ostrogoths, and the Franks, examining how these groups not only contributed to the fall of Rome but also laid the foundations for the medieval world. The Visigoths played a pivotal role in the decline of the Western Roman Empire. Their relationship with Rome was complex, marked by periods of alliance, conflict, and eventual conquest. The Visigoths, like many other Germanic tribes, were initially drawn to the Roman Empire by the promise of wealth, security, and opportunity. They served as mercenaries in the Roman army and settled within the empire's borders, adopting many aspects of Roman culture. However, the relationship between the Visigoths and the Roman Empire was fraught with tension. The empire, increasingly strained by internal decay and external pressures, struggled to manage the influx of barbarian groups within its borders. The Visigoths, who had been allowed to settle in the Roman province of Thrace, found themselves mistreated and exploited by Roman officials. This mistreatment led to a revolt under the leadership of Alaric I, a Visigothic chieftain who had once served as a Roman general. Alaric's rebellion culminated in one of the most famous events in the history of the Roman Empire, the sack of Rome in 410 CE. For the first time in nearly 800 years, Rome, the eternal city and symbol of imperial power, was captured by a foreign enemy. The sack of Rome shocked the ancient world and was seen by many contemporaries as a sign of the empire's imminent collapse. Yet, the Visigoths did not simply destroy, they also sought to build. After the sack of Rome, Alaric led his people to southern Gaul, where they established the Visigothic kingdom. This kingdom became one of the first of the so-called barbarian kingdoms that would emerge from the ashes of the Western Roman Empire. The Visigoths, while preserving their own traditions, also adopted Roman law, language, and Christianity, creating a hybrid culture that would influence the development of medieval Europe. The Visigothic kingdom in Hispania, modern-day Spain, became a major power in the post-Roman world. The Visigothic rulers maintained many aspects of Roman administration and law while also fostering the growth of a distinct Visigothic identity. The kingdom played a crucial role in the spread of Christianity across the Iberian Peninsula and contributed to the cultural and political development of the region. Another Germanic tribe that played a significant role in the fall of the Roman Empire was the Vandals. Originally from Central Europe, the Vandals migrated westward during the 5th century, driven by pressure from the Huns and other nomadic groups. After crossing the Rhine in 406 CE, the Vandals moved through Gaul and into the Iberian Peninsula, eventually crossing into North Africa in 429 CE. In North Africa, the Vandals established a powerful kingdom centered on the city of Carthage, a former rival of Rome. The Vandal kingdom quickly became a major naval power in the Mediterranean, challenging the remnants of Roman authority in the region. Under the leadership of King Gaiseric, the Vandals captured the island of Sicily, Sardinia, and Corsica, and launched raids against the coasts of Italy and Greece. The most famous of these raids was the sack of Rome in 455 CE, an event that further eroded the prestige and power of the Roman Empire. Unlike the Visigoths, who sought to integrate with the Roman world, the Vandals maintained a more hostile relationship with the Roman Empire. They were adherents of Arian Christianity, a branch of Christianity that was considered heretical by the Roman Catholic Church, and their rule in North Africa was marked by religious conflict with the Catholic population. Despite their reputation as destructive conquerors, the Vandals also contributed to the cultural and economic life of North Africa. The Vandal kingdom became a center of trade and commerce in the Mediterranean, and the Vandals themselves were known for their skilled craftsmanship, particularly in metalwork and jewelry. However, the kingdom's stability was undermined by internal divisions and external pressures, particularly from the Byzantine Empire, which sought to reclaim the lost territories of the Western Roman Empire. In 533 CE, the Byzantine Emperor Justinian I launched a campaign to reconquer North Africa, leading to the eventual defeat of the Vandals and the re-establishment of Roman rule in the region. The fall of the Vandal kingdom marked the end of one of the most powerful barbarian kingdoms in the post-Roman world, but its legacy continued to influence the history of North Africa for centuries to come. While the Visigoths and Vandals established their kingdoms in the western provinces of the Roman Empire, the Ostrogoths, another branch of the Gothic people, carved out a kingdom in Italy itself. The Ostrogoths, like the Visigoths, had a complex relationship with the Roman Empire. They had originally been part of the Hunnic Empire under Attila, but after the collapse of the Huns, the Ostrogoths sought to establish their own state within the Roman world. The opportunity came in the late 5th century when the Western Roman Empire was on the brink of collapse. In 476 CE, the last Roman emperor of the West, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by Odoacer, a Germanic chieftain who declared himself king of Italy. Odoacer's rule was short-lived, as the Eastern Roman Emperor Zeno soon invited the Ostrogothic leader Theodoric the Great to invade Italy and establish a new government. Theodoric's invasion of Italy was successful, and in 493 CE, he established the Ostrogothic Kingdom of Italy. Theodoric sought to preserve much of the Roman legacy while also establishing his own authority. He maintained Roman law and administration, employed Roman officials, and sought to promote harmony between his Gothic subjects and the Roman population. Theodoric himself was a patron of culture and learning, and his court at Ravenna became a center of art and scholarship. The Ostrogothic kingdom was one of the most successful of the barbarian kingdoms that emerged in the wake of the Roman Empire. It managed to maintain a high degree of stability and prosperity, blending Gothic and Roman traditions in a way that would influence the development of medieval European culture. However, like the Vandal kingdom, the Ostrogothic kingdom was eventually brought down by the ambitions of the Byzantine Empire. In 535 CE, the Byzantine Emperor Justinian I launched a campaign to reconquer Italy, leading to a prolonged and destructive war known as the Gothic War. The war devastated Italy, leading to the eventual collapse of the Ostrogothic kingdom and the re-establishment of Byzantine rule in the region. The destruction wrought by the Gothic War contributed to the decline of urban life in Italy and the onset of the so-called Dark Ages. Despite its relatively short existence, the Ostrogothic kingdom left a lasting legacy in Italy. Theodoric's reign is often remembered as a golden age of stability and cultural achievement in the post-Roman world, and his efforts to preserve Roman traditions influenced the development of medieval Italian culture. While the Visigoths, Vandals, and Ostrogoths established kingdoms within the former territories of the Roman Empire, the Franks, a Germanic tribe from the region of modern-day France and Germany, would go on to establish one of the most powerful and enduring kingdoms in medieval Europe. The rise of the Franks is closely associated with the Merovingian dynasty, founded by Clovis I in the late 5th century. Clovis, who became king of the Franks in 481 CE, is often credited with unifying the Frankish tribes and laying the foundations for the Frankish kingdom. His most significant achievement was his conversion to Christianity, which occurred around 496 CE. Clovis's conversion, influenced by his wife Clotilde, a Christian princess, had profound implications for the future of Europe. By adopting Christianity, Clovis aligned himself with the Roman Catholic Church, gaining the support of the Christian population of his kingdom and the endorsement of the Church. Clovis's conversion also marked the beginning of the Christianization of the Germanic peoples, a process that would continue throughout the Middle Ages. Under Clovis and his successors, the Franks expanded their territory, defeating rival Germanic tribes and consolidating their control over much of Gaul. The Frankish kingdom became the most powerful of the barbarian kingdoms in Western Europe, and the Merovingian dynasty established a tradition of kingship that would influence the development of medieval European monarchy. The Merovingian kings were known for their warrior culture, but they also sought to preserve Roman traditions, particularly in law and administration. The Frankish kingdom became a center of learning and culture, with monasteries playing a key role in the preservation of classical knowledge and the spread of Christianity. The Franks also played a crucial role in the defense of Europe against external threats, particularly the Muslim expansion into Western Europe. In 732 CE, Charles Martel, a Frankish leader and grandfather of Charlemagne, defeated a Muslim army at the Battle of Tours, halting the advance of Islam into Europe and securing the future of Christian Europe. The Merovingian dynasty eventually gave way to the Carolingian dynasty, under which the Frankish kingdom would reach its zenith. The Carolingians, particularly Charlemagne, would go on to create the Carolingian Empire, which sought to revive the Roman Empire in the West and laid the foundations for the Holy Roman Empire. The fall of the Western Roman Empire and the rise of barbarian kingdoms did not represent a complete break with the past, but rather a transformation of Europe. The new kingdoms that emerged from the collapse of Rome were shaped by a blend of Roman, Christian, and barbarian traditions, creating a new cultural and political landscape that would define the medieval world. The so-called barbarian rulers of these kingdoms often saw themselves as heirs to the Roman Empire, adopting its laws, customs, and administrative practices. They also embraced Christianity, which became a unifying force in the fragmented post-Roman world. The spread of Christianity across Europe was one of the most significant legacies of the barbarian kingdoms, as it laid the foundations for the Christian civilization that would dominate Europe for centuries. The period following the fall of Rome was also marked by the gradual emergence of new political entities that would eventually evolve into the modern nations of Europe. The kingdoms of the Visigoths, Vandals, Ostrogoths, and Franks were the precursors to the states of Spain, Italy, France, and Germany, and their influence can still be seen in the cultural and political traditions of these countries. The transformation of Europe in the wake of the Roman Empire's collapse was not a process of simple decline, but rather one of change and adaptation. The barbarian societies that once threatened the stability of the Roman world became the builders of a new European civilization, one that would carry forward the legacy of Rome while also creating something new and distinct. This concludes Chapter 4. In the final chapter, we will explore the enduring legacy of the barbarian societies in shaping the modern world, examining how their influence can still be seen in contemporary culture, politics, and identity. Chapter 5. The enduring legacy of the barbarians. As we reach the final chapter of this exploration into the history of the so-called barbarian societies, it becomes clear that their legacy is far more complex and enduring than the simplistic narratives of destruction and savagery would suggest. The barbarian groups that once challenged the might of Rome and other established civilizations were, in fact, pivotal in shaping the course of history. They were not merely the agents of the fall of empires, but also the architects of new social, cultural, and political orders. In this chapter, we will examine how the legacy of these societies has persisted throughout history and continues to influence the modern world. We will explore their impact on European culture, law, and identity, the ways in which they have been remembered and mythologized, and how their legacy resonates in contemporary society. The cultural impact of the barbarian societies is perhaps most evident in the formation of European identity. The Germanic tribes, the Vikings, the Huns, the Mongols, and other groups contributed to the rich tapestry of cultures that define Europe today. The blending of Roman, Christian, and barbarian traditions in the early Middle Ages created the foundations of what we now recognize as European civilization. One of the most significant cultural legacies of the barbarian societies is their contribution to the development of European languages. Many modern European languages, including English, German, French, and the Scandinavian languages, have roots in the languages of the Germanic tribes. The spread of these languages across Europe was facilitated by the migration and settlement of barbarian groups during the early Middle Ages. The Old English spoken by the Anglo-Saxons, for example, would eventually evolve into modern English, the most widely spoken language in the world today. In addition to language, the barbarian societies also contributed to the development of European art and literature. The epic poems and sagas of the Vikings, such as the Norse Eddas and the Icelandic sagas, have had a lasting influence on Western literature and continue to be celebrated for their storytelling and mythological depth. The warrior culture of the Germanic tribes, with its emphasis on heroism, honor, and loyalty, is reflected in medieval European literature, including works like Beowulf and the Nibelungenlied. The blending of barbarian and Roman traditions also gave rise to new forms of art and architecture. The migration of the Germanic tribes into the Roman Empire led to the fusion of Roman and barbarian artistic styles, resulting in the distinctive art of the early medieval period. The intricate metalwork and jewelry of the Visigoths, the elaborate stone carvings of the Celts, and the distinctive architecture of the Franks all reflect the cultural synthesis that occurred during this time. The legal systems of many European countries have their roots in the laws and customs of the barbarian societies. The Germanic tribes, in particular, brought with them a tradition of customary law that would have a profound impact on the development of European legal systems. The Germanic legal tradition was based on the concept of wergild, a system of compensation for wrongdoing that emphasized restitution rather than punishment. This tradition of customary law would later be incorporated into the legal codes of the medieval kingdoms that emerged in the wake of the Roman Empire's collapse. One of the most influential legal codes of the early medieval period was the Salic law, a legal code compiled by the Franks under King Clovis I. The Salic law was a comprehensive legal code that covered a wide range of issues, including property rights, inheritance, and criminal offenses. It served as the foundation for the legal systems of many medieval European kingdoms and influenced the development of modern European law. The concept of customary law, as practiced by the barbarian societies, also contributed to the development of the common law tradition in England. The common law, which is based on precedent and judicial decisions rather than written statutes, has its origins in the legal practices of the Anglo-Saxons and other Germanic tribes. This legal tradition would later be exported to the English-speaking world, where it continues to form the basis of the legal systems in countries such as the United States, Canada, and Australia. The influence of barbarian legal traditions can also be seen in the development of feudalism, the dominant social and economic system of medieval Europe. The feudal system, with its emphasis on land ownership, vassalage, and the mutual obligations between lords and vassals, was deeply rooted in the customs and practices of the Germanic tribes. Feudalism would become the defining feature of medieval European society and would continue to shape European politics and society for centuries. The barbarian kingdoms that emerged in the aftermath of the Roman Empire's collapse laid the foundations for the modern nations of Europe. The kingdoms of the Franks, Visigoths, Ostrogoths, and others were the precursors to the states of France, Spain, Italy, and Germany. The political institutions and traditions established by these kingdoms would evolve over time, leading to the formation of the modern European nation-states. The Frankish kingdom, under the Merovingian and later Carolingian dynasties, played a particularly important role in the formation of the modern state of France. The division of the Carolingian Empire among Charlemagne's grandsons in the Treaty of Verdun, 843 CE, led to the emergence of West Francia, which would eventually become the Kingdom of France. The Carolingian Empire also laid the groundwork for the Holy Roman Empire, a political entity that would dominate Central Europe for nearly 1,000 years. In Spain, the Visigothic kingdom established a tradition of kingship and governance that would influence the development of the Spanish monarchy. The Visigoths were also instrumental in the Christianization of the Iberian Peninsula, a process that would have a lasting impact on the cultural and religious identity of Spain. The legacy of the barbarian kingdoms can also be seen in the development of England. The Anglo-Saxon kingdoms that emerged in the wake of the Roman withdrawal from Britain eventually united to form the Kingdom of England. The political and legal traditions of the Anglo-Saxons, including the Witan, a council of nobles, and the concept of the king as a lawgiver, would influence the development of English constitutional law and governance. The memory of the barbarian societies has been preserved and mythologized in various ways throughout history. In medieval Europe, the barbarian was often portrayed as a noble savage, a warrior of great courage and strength, but also a figure of chaos and destruction. This duality is evident in the literature and art of the Middle Ages, where the barbarian is both feared and admired. In modern times, the image of the barbarian has been shaped by popular culture, particularly in film, literature, and television. The Vikings, in particular, have captured the popular imagination, with their exploits celebrated in countless movies, books, and television series. The image of the Viking as a fierce, seafaring warrior has become a symbol of adventure and freedom, even as it oversimplifies the complex reality of Viking society. The Mongols, too, have left a lasting mark on the popular imagination. The figure of Genghis Khan, the great conqueror, has been both vilified and revered, often depicted as the epitome of barbarian ferocity and military genius. The Mongol Empire, with its vast territories and cultural diversity, continues to be a subject of fascination for historians and the general public alike. The myth of the barbarian has also been used for political purposes throughout history. During the Renaissance, European intellectuals often contrasted the civilized culture of the Roman Empire with the barbarism of the Middle Ages, a period they saw as a time of cultural decline. This narrative was used to justify the idea of a rebirth of classical civilization, which became the driving force behind the Renaissance. In the 19th and 20th centuries, the concept of the barbarian was often invoked in the context of European colonialism. European powers, viewing themselves as the heirs of the Roman Empire, used the idea of civilizing the barbarian peoples of Africa, Asia, and the Americas to justify their imperial conquests. This narrative of civilization versus barbarism has had a lasting impact on global politics and continues to influence discussions of cultural identity and heritage. Today, the legacy of the barbarian societies continues to resonate in various aspects of contemporary culture, politics, and identity. The languages, laws, and political institutions shaped by these societies form the bedrock of modern European civilization. The cultural traditions of the Germanic tribes, the Vikings, the Huns, and others are still celebrated in festivals, reenactments, and cultural events across Europe and beyond. The idea of the barbarian also continues to challenge our understanding of civilization and cultural identity. The history of the barbarian societies reminds us that the boundaries between civilized and barbaric are often fluid and subjective. The so-called barbarians were not simply destroyers of empires, they were also creators, innovators, and builders of new worlds. Their legacy is a testament to the resilience and adaptability of human societies in the face of change. In a globalized world, where cultures and peoples are constantly interacting and influencing one another, the story of the barbarians offers valuable insights into the complexities of cultural exchange and the dynamics of power. It challenges us to rethink our assumptions about history, identity, and what it means to be civilized. The story of the barbarian societies is not just a story of conflict and conquest, it is a story of transformation, adaptation, and creation. These societies, often marginalized in traditional historical narratives, played a crucial role in shaping the world we live in today. They were the catalysts for the end of one era and the beginning of another, laying the foundations for the medieval world and influencing the course of European history for centuries to come. The legacy of the barbarians is a reminder that history is not a simple tale of progress and decline, but a complex tapestry of human experiences, where different cultures and societies interact, influence, and transform one another. The barbarian societies were not the antithesis of civilization, but a part of the dynamic process that has shaped the course of human history. As we conclude this exploration of the barbarians, we are left with a deeper understanding of their impact on the world. Their legacy lives on in the languages we speak, the laws we follow, the cultures we celebrate, and the identities we embrace. The barbarians were not just a force of destruction, they were also creators of new worlds, and their influence continues to shape our world in ways both seen and unseen. The story of the barbarians is, in many ways, the story of us all. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.